This is the 2022 Media Studies and Production Masters Showcase. Wow, Laura, can you believe it's been a year since the last one?
Last year, we gathered to celebrate the 2021 MSP MA cohort, and we gathered on Zoom. It's very exciting to be here together in person for this year's showcase. Also, we are recording it, so if there are people who can't be here we want to share it with, we'll have the recording. It's amazing to be standing here together in person to celebrate the 2022 Master of Arts students.
Yeah.
Yay! Yes!
And we are following Temple's policy on masks, and so we expect everyone in the audience to wear a mask according to Temple's policy, and the presenters can not wear a mask if they choose to do so. I also would like to acknowledge that this event is being held on the traditional lands of the Lenape people, and I want to pay my respects to elders, both past and present, and to all the indigenous peoples of the Americas.
We'd also like to thank all of the people who made this event possible today, including, but not limited to, MSP co-chairs Jan Fernbach and Matthew Lombard, Dean of Research Dr. Patrick Murphy, Graduate Office Director Nicole McKenna, all of the faculty who serve on MSP MA committees as chairs and committee members, co-teacher of the MA Project Workshop class, Dr. Adrian Shaw, and everyone who helped arrange the studio space and filming, including Jack McCarthy, Kyle Nesta, Steve Gazzardo, Angie McCluskey, Megan McGarry, and Melanie Spigo. Yay!
Yeah. And I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Clemencia Rodríguez. I am professor in the Department of Media Studies and Production, and I am the director of the Masters in Media Studies and Production.
And I'm Laura Zaylea, Associate Professor of Instruction in Media Studies and Production. Students can complete their MSP Master of Arts experience in one of three ways: with a final project, with a final thesis, or by taking the comprehensive exam. The final projects are theoretically informed creative works in multiple genres and modes.
Today, 16 MSP MA students will present their work. Our 2022 showcase includes 4 master's theses, 1 comprehensive exam, and 11 creative projects in a range of forms, including podcasts, documentaries, webisodes, a narrative video, a business plan, and mixed media creative works of various forms. Each student has 6 minutes to present. We will do all the presentations first, and then whatever time we have left, we'll do a Q&A.
All right, our first presenter is Emma Goldhaber. Emma is passionate about analyzing news coverage and received her undergraduate degree in journalism here at Klein before joining the MSP MA program. Her research is not just timely but urgent, as it focuses on news coverage of Queenan and can be used to facilitate conversations between journalists and Queenan believers. I'm delighted to introduce Emma Goldhaber, who will be presenting her thesis, Nancy Q Mystery Stories, a content analysis of the press's coverage of Queenan.
So hi everyone, my name's Emma. For my thesis, I did a content analysis of the press's coverage of Queenan. So for those that don't know, Queenan is a conspiracy theory. It originated on the message board 4chan in October of 2017. The primary beliefs is that a group of Hollywood celebrities, Democrats, and billionaires are in a group known as the Deep State, which engage in satanic child abuse. The conspiracy theory has roots in anti-Semitism and racism. It's been the cause of real-world harm and has been encouraged by members of Congress and former President Donald Trump. So for my thesis, the theoretical framework that I used was agenda-setting theory and framing theory. Agenda-setting theory posits that while mass media can't influence you on what to think, they can influence you on what to think about. This is through the emphasis and focus on specific topics. And then the second theory was framing theory, which talks about conveying the importance of certain topics through highlighting or de-emphasizing certain pieces of information. 3 research questions guided my research. The first question focuses on framing and political biases. The second research question, while similar in nature, specifically focuses on harmful aspects of the conspiracy theory. And then the third focuses about how a significant event can operate as a variable that can affect framing. So for my method, there were 6 sites of inquiry. These outlets were AP, Reuters, Slate, the New York Times, Fox, and the Wall Street Journal. 120 articles were analyzed out of almost 1,400 that were collected. The criteria for this was that if an article even mentioned QAnon, it was selected. For data cleaning, a simple random sample was conducted. So 10 articles per outlet before and after the Capitol attack were chosen. And then a sentiment analysis was taken to understand the valence of the articles, and then grounded theory methodology was used for the content analysis. So for the sentiment analysis, all outlets except one showed subtle and insignificant shifts in valence. The only outlet that actually had a significant shift was Reuters. There was, as we can see, a very sharp negative trend in valence after the insurrection. This is likely due to increased focus on extremism groups after the Capitol attack. And it's important to note here that most of the articles, they didn't really focus on QAnon was only used as a reference point. So throughout the grounded theory methodology portion of the thesis, 3 primary themes emerged. The first was the inclusion of QAnon beliefs. This was inclusion of major aspects of the belief system, which we can see the secondary themes here in the tables. There was a significant drop in inclusion of beliefs after the Capitol attack. The most drastic change was in right-leaning outlets, whereas they had some of the most detailed descriptions prior to the Capitol attack. Afterwards, there was almost no details used at all, and were only discussed 3 times. The second theme was the inclusion of political actors. As we can see again, there was a significant drop in inclusion of political actors. Prior to the Capitol attack, Donald Trump and Marjorie Taylor Greene, which is the Georgia House representative, they were the 2 primary political actors that were in the coverage. Greene is a known QAnon supporter. After Donald Trump was once again one of the major political actors, which the second one was the QAnon shaman, which was his nickname in coverage, Jacob Chansley, who was arrested at the insurrection. And then the third theme was QAnon as the primary focus within the article. This was determined by inclusion in the headline and lead and prominence within the article. As we can see, QAnon was rarely the focus of any of the articles, with only 1 article out of the entire 120 that specifically focused on QAnon. In conclusion, QAnon was often used as journalistic shorthand for extremism, far-right ideology, or to indicate an individual or group as dangerous or lacking credibility or lacking mental sanity. Thank you.
And please join me in congratulating Emma because her thesis won first place in the Klein College Awards yesterday for graduate research project. And congratulations are in order also for Temi Oshadiya, who received the first place in the Klein College Awards for in the category of Best Graduate Creative Project. So Temi, congratulations. Make us very proud. I'd like to now introduce Temi Oshadiya. She's our next presenter. Her project is the type of ideal MSP MA project model that combines superb media production skills with in-depth understanding of scholarship, theory, and research. In Temi's case, her film is strongly rooted in the works of Black feminists. I'll leave you with Temi and her film called Sexuality Scarred, the Jezebel Complex.
Oh, thank you very much, Clemencia, for that really nice introduction. No pressure here. So my film, my mini documentary, Sexuality Scarred, the Jezebel Complex, looks at the negative stereotypical portrayal of Black women's sexuality in the media. So essentially how Black women desired yet degraded, how they, valued yet pathologized. So Black women's sexuality in the media. So Black women often tend to carry this thing that scholars say is a double burden. So they're Black and then they're women. The media often gives them two options when it comes to their sexuality. So they're either desexualized or they're hypersexualized. And the mammy stereotype is is the desexualized stereotype. So essentially the mammy stereotype makes Black women cater to the needs of white men while feeling very unattractive. The Jezebel stereotypes essentially looks at Black women as hypersexual, as hoes, as we call it nowadays. According to Joelle, she said the Jezebel is the harlot and the bad Black girl. The Jezebel is the stereotype created mainly to cater to the sexual needs of white men, as it also absolves them of their responsibilities. So essentially, in my work, Baldwin talks about this thing where it's like people allow violence to Black women because of how we degrade Black women. And so when you see this hashtag on social media saying protect Black women, it's essentially because Black women are stripped of their agency, stripped of protection, and every violence towards them is allowed, if you will. And so these are very stereotypical examples of the desexualized aspect and the sexualized aspect of Black women in the media. That's the mammy. And this is the Jezebel. And just so you know, if you didn't know who that was, she won an Oscar for that, but she also wasn't allowed to get her award. And so in doing my work, I really focused on the works of Bell Hooks, Patricia Hill Collins, and they talk about the oppositional gaze, which essentially is a resistance for Black people to look. So if you go back to slavery times, Black people weren't allowed to look, weren't allowed to dress how they wanted. They didn't have any agency. This goes for all Black people, but mostly for Black women because their bodies were controlled by these white masters and these white men or white people in general. And so Bell Hooks coined this very big umbrella term where she said the oppositional gaze really gives Black people back their power, essentially gives Black women back their power to look. So it's a resistance to look. And so when you're watching movies or you're watching TV shows, you want to watch everything with a very critical lens, knowing that. The oppositional gaze, like I said, is the resistance to controlling images in the media that look at Black women through this myopic lens and very aggressive stereotypes. And so because everyone except Black women have a say in how they're viewed and portrayed, Black women are essentially, Hooks gives Black women this power to take their agency back. And so for my documentary, I interviewed 5 women, including myself. And so all of us, what was interesting for the documentary, which was in the direction I was initially going to go, is that all 5 of us had an encounter with our sexuality through the church, which is really interesting because if you think of the church, if you think of the one Black church, that's where you're supposed to get your peace and your happiness or whatever from. And so through the church is essentially very European in nature, and so it has this culture of purity that essentially Black women can never attain because we're Black, everyone thinks we're taboo, we're not clean, we're the hoes, and things like that. And so we all had that in common, where it's we encountered our sexuality through the church. Regardless of whatever we do, we're never going to be seen as pure, we're never going to be seen as innocent. And so, like I said, we are put in that binary box of you can only be this or that. And so because our identities are rooted in how we look and appear, how big we are, how sexually appealing we look to men, our sexuality tends to be visible, hypervisible, invisible, and pathologized. So we do have to navigate all these multiple identities while also navigating, being Black. And CJ, shout out to CJ, gave me this hook, Sexuality Scarred to Sexuality Healed. So essentially, we have to navigate this through our whole lives. It's not something that's going to change, but we can make it better. So how essentially do we go from sexuality scarred to sexuality healed? Essentially, this is for everybody. We have to create room for Black joy, right? Even though you're not Black. A lot of Black films are always rooted in Black trauma, which, although these stories need to be told, they're not the only stories that should be told. Black people should not just always be defined by their trauma. You also have to engage you have to critically look at media that portrays black women essentially in only this light. You also have to apply the oppositional gaze in all you do. And something very interesting that one of my interviewee said, Mayuri Holmes, she said, we're all white supremacists. Whether you agree with that or not is, it's the dialogue. We all have to confront white supremacy, right? Just like she said the work of undoing racism is not just the work of Black people. Everyone has to come together to undo that. And so when you're looking at media that portrays, the media is owned a lot by white corporations, they want to make money, and so stereotypes are going to exist. But if we do the job of critically engaging in those things, then maybe less of that will happen. I don't know. We also have to find resources. You also have to find resources. We have to find resources that can afford our knowledge. It's very easy to fall into this, this notion of engaging what's mainstream. But go further. Look at independent media. Look at what Black people are doing. Look at what Black people are putting out there. Support Black women. Protect Black women. I could preach, but I'll stop there. Can we play the video now? And obviously, I don't want to be sued, so I have works cited. A study by the Georgetown Law Center on Poverty and Inequality found that Black girls were perceived as different, with the perceptions about Black girls compared to the same age white girls, with Black girls needing less nurturing, needing less protection, needing less comfort, and knowing more about sex.
How I came to understand my sexuality was initially through the church, through the Christian lens. The majority of Christianity that is practiced is European. I grew up thinking that my body itself was sinful.
So many people always complain to my mom about how I always wore clothes that were distracting men.
Growing up in the church, you don't want an elder to pull you to the side and be like, you need to change.
I would, 19 years old, felt the need to armor myself. And so I did that by wearing baggy sweats and baggy jeans.
Going into physical church. I haven't been to a church in 3-4 years now. It hasn't changed my relationship with God. I don't want to deal with people telling me what my body is doing to other people.
When you grow up in that religious context and you start looking at shows, you start to feel really defiant about how Black women are portrayed.
I feel like certain stories need to be told.
Regardless of whatever I wear, I would look the same. It's a body I own and I have.
You at least acknowledge things that have happened with you, and you don't have to be quiet about that anymore.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Temi. It's a beautiful, beautiful documentary. And now I'm delighted to introduce Renuka Adiraju. In the fall of 2021, I had the pleasure of listening to Renuka's first podcast recording for this project, a 3-minute conversation about Hinduism. It's amazing to be here in April of 2022, celebrating how Renuka has developed what was once a 3-minute recording into a complete podcast series. I'm delighted to introduce Renuka Adiraju and her project Hindu America Podcast, Diaspora Dialogues on Religion, Culture, and Identity.
Thank you, Professor Zaylea. Hello, everyone. Good morning. I'm pleased to present a synopsis of my project titled Hindu America Podcast. As a first-generation Hindu Indian immigrant, I've had a long-standing interest in the connections between cultural practices and representations of identity. The podcast platform allows me to share information and insights on cultural resources with the community, for the community. Taking identity as the basic foundation, this project is informed by a broad range of scholarship, theoretical guardrails, if you will, on diaspora, globalization, and representation. Problems with identity construction are common to most immigrant communities, and some of these stem from such areas as insufficient awareness of resources, inaccessibility to resources, the pressure of assimilation and acculturation, and misrepresentation, basically, of religion and identity in media and the society. This podcast will aspire to fill some of these gaps by facilitating information and communication about community resources. In this slide, I'm actually doing an interview with a couple. They're volunteers who run a heritage education program for children in the area. And now I'd like to share a brief clip with you of an interview that I've done with a second-generation Hindu Indian American youth. Where do Hindu Indian American youth find support and strength as they negotiate and shape their identities? Here's Suhas's response.
One of the most important things for younger adults or kids is having that community to identify with, and I think specifically people like them. As with, I think, all religions, it kind of goes in the way of your parents tell you what you are, and you are fine with it, and you don't really pay much mind to it until it starts to become increasingly a choice for you to follow these things or identify with or even explore them. And I think that having people like you to have those conversations with and to identify with is important. And a harder task, I think, is also starts with education, specifically in these cross-cultural realms like schools or wherever, maybe sports teams or whatever, have less misinformation and more showings of Hinduism. And so it's easier to identify with.
And I'd like to share another brief clip with you about a large cultural religious festival that's held in this area. Namaste. You are listening to Hindu America podcast, where we take a deep dive into the Hindu Indian American community and explore topics pertaining to this community's experience and identity. I'm your host, Renuka Adiraju. Welcome, listeners, to this episode on Philadelphia Ganesh Festival. Festivals are the lifeblood of Hindu culture. One of the most popular is the annual Ganesh Festival, held across India and around the world in communities of Hindu diaspora. I am delighted to have as my guest today Mr. Mukund Kute, the founder of Philadelphia Ganesh Festival. Mr. Kute has overseen the growth of this festival from a one-day event to a full-fledged 10-day festival, now in its 18th consecutive year. Welcome to Hindu America podcast, Mukundji.
Namaste. It is a pleasure to be with you and speaking about a Ganesh festival tradition that we have set in this community here.
In India, Ganesh festivals, of course, enjoy a lot of patronage from both private and public sectors. So what is the motivation to take on such a gargantuan task of holding a large-scale Hindu festival here in the U.S.?
The festivals have one big advantage, that when you celebrate a multi-day festival like this, it imparts the samskaras, the value education to our children. Our understanding is that when the samskaras are imparted, the values are imparted in a very subtle and soft way, they become permanent because they take a root deep in our heart, and it becomes a second nature to practice those values that we cherish as a Hindu Americans.
Thank you for your patient and kind attention, and look for the podcast to go live very soon, and I do hope you indulge in it when you find it. Finally, my profound thanks to my family for their unwavering support, and thanks to my committee, my faculty committee, Dr. Lauren Kogan, Dr. Christine Weatherston, and Professor Ali Castellini for their constant guidance. And thanks to all my professors whom I've had the privilege of learning from at Temple University. And last but not the least, to many of the staff members here, without whose assistance this would not have been possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I had the privilege of having Ellisiah Hall in my community media course last semester. During this course, during the semester, her classmates and I learned so much from Ellisiah's profound understanding of natural hair as a marker of gender and race identities. I leave you with Ellisiah and her project titled Swan.
Hello, Good morning, everyone. Thank you for that lovely introduction. My name is Ellisiah Hall, and I'm the creator of Swan Streaming Service. And yeah, let's just get right into it. I do want to start off by saying that this is a business plan, so I hope that everyone is paying full attention. And for those of you who may perhaps be some, millionaires in the future, we are looking for partners and people to invest into us. So, if the message resonates, please feel free to pull me to the side after. Okay, so first let's start off with what is Swan Streaming. So Swan Streaming is a streaming service that actually provides information in the forms of videos on natural hair maintenance. This platform acts as an online hub that includes video tutorials, natural hair shows, streaming interviews with the community of natural hair, so like the top YouTube hairstylists and things, and product reviews as well as products. Hair products in particular are a really big aspect of natural hair. Swan Streaming was actually created with all members of the natural hair community in mind, and I'll actually kind of go deeper into that in a later slide. Okay, so here we have our mission and our vision. I'm going to paraphrase because I do have the ability to be a bit long-winded. So as you can see, you can go ahead and take a look at our mission. But our goal is to essentially provide a hub of services to a community of people that probably otherwise would not be able to have access to it. And that will be that natural hair community. Although there are plenty of other platforms that do allow people to gain that knowledge and information, there's no hub that exists that you can find all of the information that you're looking for in one space. It's really difficult for naturalistas, who are the people, the natural hair people of the community, to essentially find what they need if there isn't a hub of resources provided and available to them. Our vision is that we're able to serve more than 5,000 people within our first 3 years. So we're hoping that this is a streaming service that can be extremely helpful to the community in the future. Okay, so just a bit of research. Why did I even decide to do this came from research. So I'm pretty sure that these statistics actually should come to no surprise to any of us, but consumerism has increased since COVID-19 by 40%. Definitely makes sense. All of us were at home, had access to Amazon, and weren't really doing anything, so it would make sense that a lot of spending was happening. But more specifically, the natural hair industry actually saw an increase within that same year as well. So it is a $1.7 billion industry with expectations to grow into $1.9 billion by 2025, which is pretty big. And also the market for natural hair products, it grows at an exponential rate of like 4.7. So people are constantly tapping into this industry and this community of natural hair. And as a result, the community is starting to grow in both numbers of participants as well as those who are providing the market for the participants to feel comfortable and safe. Okay. So why is Swan Streaming even necessary? So first, let's start off with it alleviates the difficulty in finding content specific to natural hair type and porosity levels on a streaming platform. So as I've already stated, I'm fully aware that platforms such as YouTube exist and Twitch and all of these video streaming services. But the one thing that they're actually missing is the fact that they're not a specific streaming service to a specific industry, which makes it very difficult for the average person who probably knows no information about natural hair at all to actually start their research, making it very difficult or possibly overwhelming for them to continue. Also, it prioritizes easier access to relatable content and tutorials. So now let's take a look into the content of what is available on a lot of these streaming platforms. You're not always guaranteed the highest quality of content, nor are you given an easier access to relatable information. Through these sites that I hope to actually partner with, it's actually relatively difficult to actually find what it is that you're looking for and then also find the good quality of what it is that you actually need. So you'll potentially find what it is that you're looking for product-wise or perhaps hair information-wise, but that doesn't always guarantee that you'll be able to find it super duper easy. And then also it cuts back on time and product waste. As a result of having this easier access to this platform, it alleviates us possibly overspending with natural hair products that probably are not going to be useful to us, because we have a plethora of tutorials that are actually creditable resources for those who are doing research for their own hair. That way they're not overspending money on products, as well as time. I know for me personally, and I'll go into my natural hair journey in another slide, I spent a lot of time on YouTube that unfortunately I cannot get back, where I did a lot of research. Some research was actually really beneficial to me, and unfortunately a lot of it actually ended up not working. And just being honest, I also have a lot of hair products that ended up not working out very well for my hair, and I probably would have been made aware of that if I had the information available to me in an easier platform to digest. Okay, so our logo and our company colors. So this lovely logo was created by a good friend of mine, Mylyn Spears, and as you can see, it has a swan, beautiful colors of black, gold, and white. Those colors were actually strategically selected as I ended up doing a bit of research identifying the common colors between most of the hair products that were within the natural hair community. They all had the same common colors of white, gold, and black. Those specific colors were chosen as well because of psychological reasons. Black represents strength and unity, whereas yellow also represents joy, happiness, and peace. So those colors were very strategically selected as well. So our target audience. So we actually have several, what I would consider to be several different avatars or people that we intend on targeting specifically. But just to give a very brief general over range, our ages that we tend to focus on would be between the ages of 18 as high as 65 years of age. We're specifically interested in targeting the community of people who probably don't know as much about natural hair as they would like to know, as well as targeting a community of natural hair experts that can actually provide that information to our platform. So our website and what I would consider to be our big three. So our website is Swan Streaming Service. As a matter of fact, after the presentation, I would love for you all to take a look at it. The beta website is up and running currently. And first we have the Pond, which is the actual streaming service itself, with the community itself. We also have our Black Swans, which are our content creators. So there is an aspect of our streaming service where we are seeking content creation, specifically from natural hair influencers. So this is also creating a pipeline of opportunities for natural hair influencers to specifically put their content on our site. And again, they will be considered Black Swans. And then we also have a storefront that will have access to a lot of the natural hair products that are being discussed in these tutorials available right on our site as well, making it very easy, like a one-stop shop, general hub for you to be able to watch the video, receive the information, and purchase the products that you need. So my personal journey and the journey to Swan Streaming. So natural hair is a passion of mine. It has been a passion of mine since I was a child. I was always allowed to experiment with my hair. However, I also grew up during a time where natural hair was not being heavily embraced. So although I was given full autonomy for me to actually be able to, take control of my hair, unfortunately, what I was viewing and seeing from a lot of my peers was not the same respect level or energy, and it prompted me to become super passionate about it. Also, the history of natural hair in relation to people of color, specifically Black women. There were several movements, and still currently are several movements that are happening in terms of the relation of Black hair in professionalism, for example, or the workplace, as well as Black hair in general settings. So the history of natural hair, the Black Power movement, and of the 1970s up until the new natural hair movement of today's day and age also inspired me to want to make sure that I'm protecting this group of people who are essentially protecting their crowns, as the natural hair community likes to put it. And also just lacking the resources and guidance during my own journey. As I've already shared, I have spent a lot of time on YouTube. And again, unfortunately, I cannot get that time back. I've also spent a lot of money on products that ended up not working out very well for my hair. And I'm sure that I'm not the only person who has experienced this. So my goal is to essentially make sure that I'm alleviating a lot of those issues that the common naturalista has, especially the new introductory naturalista, making sure that she has an easier time adjusting to her natural hair journey. And here are our sources. Thank you.
Thank you, Elijah. That was wonderful. And now I'm delighted to introduce Maura Gallagher. Maura believes that film is not just entertainment, but a way to have conversations about the world, to validate or mirror your own experiences, and to learn about things you were previously not aware of. It's exciting to see how Maura has put this belief into practice in a podcast focused on gender and media analysis. I'm delighted to introduce Maura Gallagher and her final graduate project, Captured Women, a podcast about representation, women, and coming-of-age films.
Hi, everyone, and thank you so much, Laura. This is my podcast, the Captured Women Podcast. It is centered around young women's representation in coming-of-age films, and I could ramble on about it for a while, but I will play an intro to spare you for that. Hi, friends. Welcome to the Captured Woman Podcast. My name is Maura Gallagher. I'm your host, and I'm so happy you're here. I hope you love film, because that's what we're talking about. But if you don't, that's okay. You can leave. Or not. I don't make the rules. I wanted to make this podcast about something that truly impacted me, that has been a part of my life for so long and has kind of evolved with me. And for me, that's film. I love the movies. I love going to the movies. I love watching movies at home. I love sharing my favorite films with friends, forcing them to watch them, and then like staring at their faces the whole time to see if they're reacting at all to the film. And I'm 22, so I'm pretty young. And I was trying to think of like, okay, yeah, I like comedy, I like horror, I like drama. But is there like a specific trope or a specific genre of film that really resonates with me and that I go back to time and time again? And for me, that was, I realized, coming-of-age films. So if you're not familiar with what a coming-of-age film is, it's simply a film that follows the protagonist as they transition from childhood to adulthood. And that kind of spans a good chunk of years. I feel like that transition can, arguably be considered to have be starting in, your teenage years, your early teen years. And it continues well into your early 20s. So I am currently still kind of in my coming of age era, if you will, but I've been going through it for a very long time. And I think I love these films because it kind of gives me validation in my experiences. I get to see through these characters and the events that are their lives that these changes and these challenges are expected. We experience so much in such a short period of time, and we're always learning and we're always trying to better ourselves. And sometimes in that we get lost. We don't always know exactly where life is going, and there's external factors like people and obstacles that change it. So, we might have a plan, but that plan doesn't always play out the way it does in our heads. And that's kind of why I love coming-of-age films. Actually, there's a little quote from an article called Why Are Coming-of-Age Films So Important to Us that the Edinburgh International Film Festival posted, and I just want to share it. It says, "It's an eye-opening moment or series of experiences that make us who we are, the most personal and vulnerable moments of our youth, captured almost perfectly on film." And that's amazing. I don't know, I think that it says it so succinctly and so accurately, and I kind of wanted to leave it at that, but I also want to expand on it, obviously. I think we turn to film for a lot of different reasons, but one of the main ones being kind of mirroring us, being a reflection of our lives and how we are active members of society and what that society that we are a part of looks like. And that's exactly, for me, what coming-of-age films do, and more specifically, coming-of-age films that have female leads, because I'm a woman. So I wanted to use this podcast as an opportunity to look back through some decades and the coming-of-age films that have come out of those decades and discuss kind of what these films were telling me and why they're so important and how they've changed over the years. How has the coming-of-age format and the messages that they're sending evolved with society, and or how have they stayed the same, and how can they do better. So that's what the Captured Woman podcast is all about. It's a 3-part series. We're going to start in the 1990s and we're going to end in the 2010s. And we're going to look at some film and we're going to talk about them, and I'm really excited. So I hope you are as well. I hope you stick around, and thank you for being here. This is Captured Woman. To reiterate, it's a podcast centered around young women's representation in coming-of-age films. Each episode covers 3 films, and it gives a platform to kind of discuss the values and messages that could be construed from these representations. And I was looking at it through the lens of cultural studies theory and kind of how society creates meaning and uses different powers to do so. So race, ethnicity, gender, sex, social class. And I chose film because it's a major part of popular culture. It's something that we all kind of interact with pretty regularly, and especially young women. I think we're all exposed to film and media younger and younger now, and so it's really important to know what we see and how it impacts us, and what it's telling us and how it shapes who we are in such an impressionable time of our lives. Reinforces new and existing ideologies for young women and gives roles and rules. So I did the 3 decades because I wanted it to be a timeline. I wanted it to be a capture of like a period of time, not just a snapshot. And I think that's what's so cool about film and media is it archives what is happening in that moment in time, and you get to look back and you get to connect. And you can watch as culture evolves and changes. So before I leave you, I just want to give you kind of a glimpse of what I end up talking about, if you want to end up listening. So purity versus sexual prowess. There's a lot of emphasis in these films of the need for women to stay pure, but then to also be sexually desired, specifically by men, and then how that romantic relationship with a man becomes all they should be thinking about and all they should care about. It's most important. And coming with that is a sense of desire for status. In a lot of these films, you'll notice women in high school are always aiming to be the most popular, have the hottest guy, whatever it may be. It's their only goal, and they will do whatever it takes to get it, whether it means changing who they are or dropping everyone in their friend group. And you see kind of the beauty standards and male gaze and a lot of these characters in both negative and positive lights. So thank you.
Last semester, Coltrane Jamison took my course on community media. In our class discussions, CJ always brought up radical ideas emerging from the intersection of history, power, art, and political agency. In his MA project, CJ maintained this complexity of working with art and political engagement. I leave you with CJ's and his project titled Orphan.
Thank you. I'm about getting ready to. Good morning, all. It occurs to me that your life's work ought to enchant you, take your hand and lead you to places unseen and unheard, coach you through thorn-ridden bush and sharp weed at foot, to beguile you so that you might overcome what the word eventually brings you to feel: exhaustion, rejection, and defeat. All this pulling and tugging and heaving and shoving for the promise of fresh fruit. Well, today is the day that we eat. My project is called Orphan, and it is an interdisciplinary biomythography as well as a metaphysical manifesto on alternative mythologies for Black men and boys. Contained within a 24-card deck are stories, poetry, and characters which explore our connection to self, community, and wholeness, based on Bell Hooks' book, We Real Cool Black Men and Masculinity. Now, Hooks suggests a condition of psycho-spiritual damage amongst communities of Black men and boys as a result of a history of demonization, exploitation, and communal self-harm. She also offers a remedy to study the work of Black women thinkers and artists who have changed their own personal mythologies. And so I chose to explore the work of these 3 Black women for this project: Ntozake Shange, playwright, creator of the choreo poem, and writer of For Colored Girls Who Have Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Was Enough; Audre Lorde, warrior poet, Black feminist scholar, artist, and author of Zami, A New Spelling of My Name, a biomythography; and Louisa Tiche, a spiritual practitioner, dancer, and author of the book Jambalaya, The Natural Women's Book to Personal Charms and Practical Rituals. So I researched the strategies that these women used to confront the negative stereotypes which were damaging to their own self-mythologies. Then I used those strategies on myself in order to generate tools for my own healing, with careful attention to the ways in which I could share this work in community, not unlike how we're doing now. This project manifested in performances, found objects, sculptures, poetry, screenplays, and most saliently, an oracle deck. So let's finally get to the deck. Each card in the deck represents an aspect of the biomythography. So there are 3 suits. The spirit cards, like the ones you see before you, represent specific characters and their thematic emphases. For example, we have here the Quiet Eyes card, which depicts a figure in white emerging from the place where the moon meets the water. This figure represents contemplation and mystery as a site of discovery. And these characters appear as voices within the performance text of this work, as well as the stories contained within the screenplays. The site/site cards are locations of power in this card deck. They represent larger ideas attached to physical locations and sacred spaces. The butterflies card above me, represents the ancestors. It features a low burning white candle in front of a family photo with butterflies flying all around. The card itself expresses careful attention to those who have come before you and their efforts. And finally, there are the sayings card. These cards feature a number of haiku from a writing series I did for the project, and they're the most explicit in their message, often giving specific instructions or advice. My favorite is this last one: bright-eyed boys, saddened by the worthlessness of joy, will find comfort here. Now, the choice to create a card deck comes from a desire to trouble what we think of as useful media in this program and in our world more broadly. Cards, a collection of images in your hand that you can shuffle, dress, pull, play with. There's something distinctly kinetic and indeed frictional about them. They're hot. And while some may have something to say about these cards and their heat, I would end my presentation today by offering this haiku from one of the sayings cards. I tried to be cool, but my spirit be so hot, it melted chains down. Thank you.
That's beautiful. Thank you, CJ. And now I'm delighted to introduce Josh Kelly. Josh does a range of audio work, including a collaborative podcast with TUJ, Crybaby Anime Club, and hosts a radio show at WPRB under the name DJ Pup. It was a pleasure to see him design and engineer sound for the narrative film Choices in producing and directing last semester, and inspiring to hear his initial audio recordings for what is now his Master of Arts final project. I'm delighted to introduce Josh Kelly and his project Pet Sounds, Presence, Experience, and Transcendence in Music.
Oh, hello, everyone. Thank you for the introduction, Laura. Thank you for everyone being in the program with me and having all these experiences together. And also thank you to my committee, Dr. Cleveland, Dr. Lombard, and Jack Klotz for chairing it. My project is Pet Sounds in the name, but it's about presence, experience, and transcendence. And to kind of illustrate that idea a little bit, it'll take just a second if you just stop and listen to this room. If I played back a recording of that silence, I don't think you would be able to see this room through that. What this project is trying to do is really looking at music and how music is able to take you and project you into spaces of memory, contact with people, and how music really has that magic to be able to do that in ways that other sounds wouldn't be able to. My project, takes the form of a podcast. Really, it's focused on what I said, that ability that music has to do that sort of transportive, transformative power. And I opened up a room for conversation with what I'd like to call music practitioners, and people that it's a wider definition than just people who are artists, so to speak, not just picturing advertisements with Ray-Bans and people being like cool on stage and with a guitar or whatnot, that music has this communal, spiritual power that is often overlooked. And I bring myself into the conversation as a music practitioner, not as an artist, but as someone who curates. I've done radio programming and writing for the last 10 years, and in the project, I get into what led me to that practice and the reasons why. And then I have conversations with other music practitioners about their intersection with music and what it means to them. My research is very much philosophically grounded. I really found the work of French existential theorists to be able to, as you might imagine, this is somewhat abstract of a topic. The three theorists that I looked at the most were Henri Bergson, Gilles Deleuze, and shout out to CJ with the recommendation of hauntology, Jacques Derrida. These three theorists are working on things that take these abstract concepts that I have and are able to create a grounding through theoretical practice, and they really helped me illustrate the connections between self, identity, presence, and community. So the podcast starts out with an autoethnography. I find it's a very useful method for self-exploration in a critical way, and also for covering things that might be somewhat difficult of a topic. And the person that was most important to me for music, that taught me how to listen to music, was my dad. And briefly in the podcast, I kind of go over his passing and the particular circumstances around it and how it created this sort of painful tension between me and the music that I had grown so much to love. And after his passing, how it created this sort of wanting, this search for meaning and search for connection to music, but also to people. And in the space of this podcast, I kind of view this episode more as a pilot. I hope to have more conversations down the road. The two people I spoke to in this were, his name's covered, but over there is R. Benny on the left side. He's a Bay Area synth musician and field recording artist, and I talked to him about being able to create feelings and emotions through, what people might conceive of as like clinical machines, synthesizers, and his connection to songs and how they help him memorialize people. The other person I spoke to is Derek Peter, who is a folklorist and also a practicing musician. But specifically, I talked to Derek about their project where they have traveled around Appalachia collecting field recordings and personal stories from people that were that had relatives recorded in the Library of Congress. Talked to him about a voice that he came across, this woman, Lena Turbeville, and how just from doing his own work and hearing her come up in this playlist, how he was so drawn to her and this sort of connection that he formed with Lena through the music and these recordings, and how pursuing that voice actually led him to her descendants and to a real present experience from something that could have been very disconnected. And I think all that's left, I'm going to play a clip, a little trailer for the podcast.
So I feel like I'm always chasing that, like that undescribable feeling, which was kind of like this door into this other world, collectively sharing what we would discover on our own, sharing music like that. I think that was more formative than anything familial.
That was just kind of like a whoa moment, because I think other than that, I just heard what was on the radio. That definitely, I think more than anything, influenced the way I heard music and the way I started to make my own music. It's those moments that mean more to me than, yeah, any other sort of expression at this point.
Music. When people say that they're transported by a song, where do they go? Who's there to greet them? The music we hear, a vehicle for meaning making, a way to judge the passage of time, to connect with each other, and to connect with ourselves. Presence, experience, and transcendence. Pet Sounds is an exploration of that untouchable but inescapable experience that music can provide. Listen along wherever you get your podcasts. And that's it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you, Josh. That is such a wonderful project. Music so simple and yet so profound. I still remember having lunch, a virtual lunch, with Alan Liu in the fall of 2020. Dr. Patrick Murphy and I organized this get-together for our new international students, the grad international students. It is hard to imagine arriving in a new country, a new city, a new language in the middle of the pandemic. Alan had just arrived from Taiwan, and despite all these obstacles, here he is culminating his master's degree. Alan decided to culminate his master's degree with a comprehensive examination, and so we are going to talk to Alan about that.
Good morning, everyone. It's really nice to see all your faces in person finally here again. And thank you, Clemencia, for the kind words, the introduction.
Yeah, of course.
This is way more formal than I thought it would be. So it'll be just a conversation.
It's our family. It's our Klein family. So one of your exam questions was about feminist theory in media studies. Can you tell us why you selected feminist theory to explore media?
So since my undergrad, I've been studying like English literature and kind of different literary theory. So I was really like building my knowledge and interest in feminist theory. So I kind of wanted to go more into this when I came to the MSP. This MSP exam gave me a way to delve deeper into the feminist media theory, and I've got to be able to critique and read every media text from a feminist point of view. So if you want to, basically, you can read media in every way you want to, like feminist and racial theory and everything. And I can kind of go over how my exam was organized. The first part, I focused on the feminist theorizing. I used like an evolving theory of misogyny and how current media scholars discussing different media texts. And in the second part, I analyzed RuPaul's Drag Race, which I did a content analysis in my first year of this program. And my research methods, just like I said, I use content analysis. I feel like feminist theory is a very, I think it's very important and very useful in addressing patriarchy directly, because everything about gender and everything about the inequality in this society, I mean in gender inequality specifically, originates from patriarchy, and feminists confronts it and directly address it. So I use this. And I also feel like since feminism have been a really obvious and very big theory in this world, a lot of people may think it's overdone or over-researched, but this theory is evolving and ever-changing. So, for example, in my exam, I used a feminist scholar called Kate Mann. She redefines misogyny as something like a legal authority to enforce women and men, like regardless gender, to perform their gender and sexual acts in a certain way. So if you don't abide by the rules, no matter who you are, like what gender you have, you are punished. This is like a legal authority. And sexism is like another way to justify patriarchy. So this is like, I think, the most important part of the theory I used in my exam.
Fascinating. So yeah, that's the beauty of media, that is all about meaning. And so we can look at meaning in so many ways. So another area that you explored in your exams was how media represent the LGBTQI community. What did you learn about the media representations of Western media compared to Asian media?
So in my second exam, compared to the first one, this is more like a gender study. This is not like very feminist center. So I learned the structure and agency debates from the media institution class by Professor Osman. So I use this theory to discuss the social inequality and media representation in both Western American and Asian, the Taiwanese television shows. So I analyzed for media text. I analyzed the TV shows from America and Taiwan. The show I analyzed here is The Ellen Show, and the show I analyzed from Taiwan is called Consi Coming. So since both Ellen and the show host of the Taiwanese show, they are both really big celebrity hosts who came out on TV, I analyzed the differences between different social contexts and cultural contexts. And compared to the American media, the Taiwanese host who came out on the TV was facing a more hostile and more direct questioning and challenging situation from people, the public, and media. So I kind of compare the differences between the two. And for the movie I analyzed, I did Moonlight for the American cinema and Dear X from Taiwan. So Moonlight focuses more on the issue of pursuing masculinity in the Black community and how anti-LGBTQ sentiment fermented in this community. And for Dear X from Taiwan, it focuses more on the familial issues. Since Taiwan is more of a homogenous society, we don't have that many racial groups. The intersectionality between the two countries are very different. So I analyzed these two. And I feel like just by doing this exam, I've got to explore the different ways of, presenting and representing the LGBTQ community in the world. Yeah.
Thank you. Tell us a little about your experience preparing for these exams. What was the most challenging and the most rewarding?
The most challenging part, it might sound a little cliche, but it's definitely the time management thing, because I have to do 3 exams in 2 weeks, and each exam takes only 48 hours. We did discuss questions with our committee members beforehand, but you only got the final questions at the day you chose to take the exam. So it's like you have to be able to, consume and organize content in a very timely fashion, and you have to be able to write very fast. And I also did my 3rd exam on with a journalism professor. We did on a news production. So it was also a 48-hour news production. I covered how AAPI business in Philly are struggling in this changing business landscape post-COVID. So I tried to interview some people, and some of them just ghosted me or vanished in the air. And so it's like for doing the exam, you have to be able to make a real quick news judgment and always have the flexibility to change.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and congratulations.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Alan. And now I'm delighted to introduce Lauren Peterson. Lauren's research analyzes the advertising of skin lightening creams in the Philippines and started when she first saw billboards for skin lightening creams on EDSA, a famous highway in Manila. She was amazed and perplexed by the obsession with tanning salons and spray tans in the United States and with skin lightening creams in the Philippines. Several of Lauren's family members are here today, including some who live in the United States and some who are originally from the Philippines. So a quick shout out to Lauren's family. Hello! Yay! And now I'm honored to introduce Lauren Peterson and her thesis, Who's the Fairest of Them All? A Content and Rhetorical Analysis of Filipino Advertising for Skin Whitening Products.
Hi, thank you for the introduction. And then you can go to the next slide. Up here. Yeah, sorry, I'm a little too short. Okay, so for my thesis, these were some of the related theories that I looked at to guide my research. So the first idea I looked at was feminist consumerism, which is when a company's products are marketed to a female audience that places an emphasis on their choices and the resulting empowerment that comes after the purchasing. I looked at glittery generalities, which is when information is presented as facts but cannot be scientifically proven or tested. I also looked at cumulation theory, which is when a company repeats the same message over and over, so that the customers don't forget those intended messages. And then one of the last ideas I looked at was skin tone tension, which is the psychological gap between the self-perceived skin tone and the ideal skin tone. And then next one. So from the research questions that that helped guide my work were, what are the percentage frequencies of repeated P words in Gluta-C's advertising slogans and its context when marketing the skin lightening cosmetics? And how do Gluta-C's advertisements use the eternal proofs of Neo-Aristotelian tradition to persuade customers into buying the fairness products? So for my methods, I did a content analysis and then a rhetorical analysis. So for the content analysis, I chose keywords based on other studies that highlighted important words like, so for example, young and smooth, and I worked with 38 advertisements, so I counted up the keywords and then I divided by the number and came up with percentages. And I had chosen digital advertisements for the sake of accessibility because I'm researching from the United States and I don't have access to, I can't see print media from here. And I chose Instagram as the source because for customers, it's free for anyone who chooses to sign up. I chose Gluta-C as a company because it had a moderate amount of influence. And I also chose for the rhetorical analysis, I did Neo-Aristotelian criticism. It's one of the oldest forms of analysis, and there's plenty of precedents for me as a new scholar. Yeah, for the data I collected, so for the content analysis, I saw that most of the keywords, so like soft, instant, radiant, appeared at 5%, so it was used not so frequently. Others were recorded at higher frequencies, such as be at 7%, protect at 10%, get at 15%. The most frequent repetition I saw was your at 31%, and then skin and white at 50%. And then for the rhetorical analysis ethos, I outlined that the companies outlined their ingredients. They would say, for example, the products had green tea extract and papaya enzymes. And then also under ethos, they reassured the safety of their products. So this implies that the company has nothing to hide. They claim to be derma-tested, for example. And then pathos, which has to do with emotional appeals, which was the most frequently categorized content in my project. It negatively reminded customers of their undesirable appearances, so the taglines would mention like dead and dry skin, spider veins and dark circles. And then also under pathos, they would positively describe how people would feel after using the products, so they would say like, be confident, be worry-free after using these products. And then for logos, which has to do with logical appeals, I noticed that the advertisements, the taglines, they highlighted the convenience of the product. So for example, it would say, oh, this product works while you sleep, so there's no extra effort from the customers, and also talked about other benefits like slowing hair regrowth to reduce shaving and plucking, so it's not necessarily just for skin lightening. And then for my findings, so for the content analysis with the words that I was looking at, I noticed the highest repetition was adjectives rather than verbs, and I concluded that customers already know that the products lighten people's skin, so they need to know how it differs from competitors. I noticed that the words that were repeated were easy to understand word choice because complicated words would lose audiences who are unfamiliar. And then there was a lot more positive connotations with the words rather than negative ones, and they want customers to have a positive association with the brand. And then when I did the rhetorical analysis under ethos, in tradition with ethos, a lot of the analysis looks at the background of the speakers, but because there was no accessible information about the corporate history besides the parent company or the social media managers who were posting this content, I couldn't really assess based on that background. But I did note they weren't really involved with any scandals like Unilever or Glutamax, so they tend to be seen more positively of customers because there aren't any of these scandals. And then for pathos, I noticed that it displayed this examples of the literature that I was looking at. So for example, one of the advertisements says, look instantly fresher and whiter, and that's based on a subjective appearance. You can't really test that. You look different to one person and may not to another. And then I also noted that the language uses words with skin tone tension in mind, so there would be superlative adjectives like fresher and whiter, so that implies that people aren't satisfied with their current looks. Rather, they'll be happy using the product because it'll make them look apparently fresher and whiter. And then finally for logos, I noticed that there wasn't a lot of metaphorical language. There wasn't like figures of speech as seen in a lot of advertising language. And I determined that logically writing out the benefits is better than being creative, especially in this digital landscape where content is consumed so rapidly and people don't have time to digest metaphors. And that's it.
I want to introduce you all to Jackie Minnis. Jackie's project draws from theories of identity and intersectionality to demonstrate how media representations have specific and concrete impacts on the lives of people. For her master's project, Jackie produced a nonfiction documentary short titled More to Me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Clemencia, for that wonderful introduction. And I want to say thank you so much for my committee chair, Laura, and my committee members. This project wouldn't have been completed without you guys, so thank you so much. My name is Jacqueline Minnis, and my nonfiction documentary, More to Me, showcases 4 Chinese American adoptees that grew up in transracial households across the US, not across the US, in the US. These girls were also all adopted from the same adoption group back in Guangdong province, and they were adopted in 1997, so, and yeah. Okay, so by asking Chinese American adoptees how American media has impacted their own views on their own identity and the society they grew up in, it helps better understand the negative and stereotypical media portrayals of Asians. They don't just impact Chinese American adoptees, but they impact all East Asians and East Asian Americans. All right, so for this culminating project, I examined the communication theory of identity and social mirroring. And it kind of helped better understand and grasp how we use media as communication and how it can translate into how adoptees continuously seek identity throughout their lives. And social mirroring is best explained as the way we kind of view ourselves and how we view others, as well as how we've ingrained in our society these preconceived notions of another race whenever interacting with persons of color. Okay, this piece is conversational, and its main goal is to start a conversation not only about adoption, but about more and better Asian representation in the media. And I mean, this project is important to me because I'm part of the Chinese American adoptee community, and I have experienced firsthand what it's like to be confused and frustrated at the portrayals of past representations of Asians on the screen in American media. We need more Asian representation, not just on the screen, but behind the scenes as well. So through this project, I'm really excited to bring a little more Asian representation to the light. And I dedicate this project to my mother because I know we could all say this, but I really wouldn't be here without her today. So thank you.
personally for me, I feel like my adoption story is ongoing. I feel like it hasn't ended.
We didn't know we were going to grow up on the other side of the world, but we did. And here we are. And this is our story.
And here is our Adoptions from the Heart group, going all the way down there, or all over the place. There we go.
Yeah, no, this is good. I mean, I like talking about it. I don't talk about it often, but I feel good sharing my story. It's a good one, I think.
I feel like the adoptive story is just an ongoing process of learning what it means to be adopted after you return to like your adopted country or like with your adoptive family.
Having all these labels of being Chinese, being American, being adopted, being from Delaware, you know, all these things, being from Guangzhou, all the labels, it gives me like a foundation.
Trying to fit into that mold at times of, you know, being Asian, whatever that means.
Identity is something that is always at the forefront of my mind.
What does Asian American representation mean to me? To me, it means a lot.
Till high school, maybe even college, I had Mulan.
It's not enough just to like be on screen. It's also like, you know, what kinds of characters and what kind of role do they have to play in the story and how important are they to the story?
But it's also important to know that Asian representation is different for all Asians.
I think it could always be better. There's, I feel like, always room for improvement.
Its impact and its value, especially for young Asian American kids growing up, cannot be overstated.
Absolutely beautiful and inspiring. Congratulations on your project. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Maya Queenan. Over the past year and a half, I've seen Maya create a range of work in many media forms, including narrative video, immersive documentary, and interactive video. Last year, Maya created an augmented reality magazine called Women Champions, which celebrates women in sports. Maya's love for empowering athletes through media is also present in her graduate project, which is a webisode series about athletes and mental health. I'm delighted to introduce Maya Queenan and her final graduate project, Mind Matters Most.
Hello, everyone. I'm Maya, and thank you, Dr. Laura. Wait, where does this go? Okay, anyways. So this is Creating Mind Matters Most, a web series about mental health in athletes. So I'm a big sports girl. My dad was a D1 athlete, and then he played professional basketball overseas for 13 years. I was always that girl in undergrad. I didn't miss a single football game all 4 years. So I knew I wanted to do something sports-related, but I didn't know like what kind of direction I wanted to take this in. And then I thought about my time I spent with Ryan Helinski. So Ryan was a starting quarterback at my old school, and I worked on the same campaign as him. And during our time working together, I learned a lot about him and his family story. So Ryan's older brother was also a D1 athlete, and during his junior year at Washington State University, he committed suicide. So his family created a nonprofit called Helinski's Hope, and their And their main mission is to change the stigma surrounding mental health in athletes. Okay, so what is Mind Matters Most? So Mind Matters Most is a collaboration with TUL, Temple University's Mental Health and Wellness Center for Student Athletes. So this was in collaboration with Dr. Stephanie Coakley. And so basically, Mind Matters Most is a 9-episode web series that discusses different aspects of mental health. The series ranges from anywhere from injury to to depression and anxiety. So Mind Matters Most was created monthly and occasionally published to TUL's social media, and each episode featured a Temple student athlete or a Temple athletic coach. Every athlete featured is a member of Temple Athletics mental health advocacy group as well. So my project uses relational cultural theory, which was originated in the 1970s and was created through the feminist movement. It basically acknowledges that relationships is what drives human connection. And RCT adopts the belief that humans need, or like basically what I said, but anyways, humans grow towards a mutual respect for each other, and in order for us to coexist and have diversity, we have to acknowledge that we're different. We have to both, be present in what we are. So this project uses relational cultural theory to grow a mutual respect for each other, the host and the viewer. So the main goal of this project is for the viewers to feel seen. That's why this project was created by athletes for athletes. So like I said earlier, every person featured in this project was a student athlete. So now we're gonna watch episode 6 featuring my good friend Jackie Turpak, and the discussion is injury.
Hi, I'm Jackie Turpak at Temple University, and we are the Temple Athletics Mental Health Advocacy Group. As student athletes, we must meet the intense demands of our sport while maintaining a high level of academics. Trying to be successful on and off the court can be incredibly difficult, and if we get injured, the added pressure to perform can be overwhelming. Injuries are very common within sports, and while some injuries can be very minor, others can be very taxing on the body and create psychological burdens. We are sometimes not honest with ourselves and often not honest with others about the severity of our injuries, and we might cover up our pain and deny altogether. Therefore, we might be reluctant to seek the proper treatment from medical professionals. And even if we are taking proper steps in treating our physical injury, we can still have mental health issues such as depression and anxiety. While processing the information about our injury, it's very common for us to have an emotional response. These emotions can range from disappointment to enrage, and it can also lead to a lack of motivation. It's very important that we, as well as our coaches, are aware that negative reactions are common, such as disordered eating, isolation, being short-tempered, and being irritable. For coaches and athletic trainers, it is important to know the signs and symptoms of mental health issues so they can instruct us on the next steps to receive proper help. This is the best way to get us back on the playing field and back on track in the right frame of mind. So, what should you do if you're dealing with an injury? Well, you need to follow your doctor's instructions. If they tell you to wear a cast for 6 weeks, wear a cast for 6 weeks. And this next step often gets overlooked, but you need to make sure your body is getting enough rest. And the last step is having proper nutrition and fueling your body with what it needs. And your body is healing, and these are the steps that will help you and your body get better. For Minds Matters Most with TUL, I'm Jackie Turpak, and I'll see you next time.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Oh, we had one more. It's okay. I can just say it. I just want to give a special thanks to my committee members, my committee head, Matt Fine, and especially to the Temple athletes who were featured in this. I couldn't have done this without them.
Now I want to introduce to you Cass Salley. Cass came to the MSP MA program with so much interest in exploring the power of media and digital platforms in human relationships. For her culminating project, Cass has completed a 3-part documentary that reflects on romance as a human experience that has suffered complex transformations since the rise of digital platforms and social media. I'll leave you with Cass and her project titled Romance on the Socials.
So thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, as well as everyone else said. It's really hard to follow up with Maya. My project is called Romance on the Socials, and essentially it is a 3-part documentary episode series where the first episode is just going to be introducing what my topic is, an interview-based second episode where you'll see some familiar faces, and a human Likert scale exercise in the third episode. Very similar to, if anyone has ever seen it, YouTube's Jubilee series called Spectrum, where it's 5 strangers brought into a space and having to openly discuss a topic or a problem, or something that they all have in common. So Romance on the Socials is an exploration of what values we attach to our romantic situations from the feeds that we see regularly on social media timelines. What our expectations or what our standards are heavily tied into the influences that we see from our friends, our followers, and the people that we follow. And through the scope of strangers and their experiences, I've allowed an open space for viewers to self-reflect their own habits, their choices, and their beliefs when involving themselves in romance on social media platforms. So through careful development, one can see that social media has transformed from just mere codes to simplistic profiles to current platforms that are used to portray a more ideal image of oneself or one brand. Society places a lot of significance on these bonds because platonic and professional relationships are very important, but romantic relationships and traditions are just as valuable and important as the ones that are platonic and professional. I also think that there's a lot of me and my personal story sprinkled in here too. Granted, I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but my boyfriend and I go back about 11 years ago, and now that we're starting our own family, that also pushed a lot of the passion that drove into this project. Overall, the goal and significance of this project is to understand the variety of values that are attached to social media platforms and how people self-reflect upon their own behaviors within the bonds that they create. So in the Romance on the Socials docuseries, you'll see self-representation on social media being discussed, self-embellishment on social media accounts, public disclosure of relationships, trust, boundaries of relationships, and what frequent use of social media means to you and your partner. Ultimately, there's going to be two theories that are mostly highlighted to support this project. The first is going to be Erving Goffman's theory of self-presentation. Goffman argues that in social interactions, individuals present themselves in such a way to best further their own agendas with their interactions and interpret self-presentation of others according to those same criteria points. The way that we want to control how others see us is also about how you kind of see ourselves, so kind of placing ourselves in the best light that we possibly can in order to make friends, make relationships, and maintain those bonds. It is a skill to achieve a level of comfort with who we're trying to be involved with, and to also be confident. Reports have seen that social media platforms suggest the use of misrepresentation or embellishment through the offering of editability. So to some users, the behavior of simply placing one's best foot forward in friends could probably be a little white light to some, where others could be you're completely embellishing and lying to others. Another theory that is used is George Gerbner's mean world syndrome theory. And this idea explains the high levels of media consumption can create a false or exaggerated schema about the world around them, or in this case specifically, romantic relationships. This theory is often associated with the perception of your surroundings being more dangerous than what they actually are, and humans tend to do the same thing with romantic relationships. And people assume that everyone is just as capable of being unloyal and manipulative in their behavior. So whether you hear about a toxic relationship or an unhealthy experience between people, that influence and fear tends to carry over with intimacy that you bring into your own relationship. So essentially, the goal for everyone to feel and react to this project is to have everyone understand the examples and experiences in Romance on the Socials to create a sense that social media representation can either positively or negatively impact one's romantic engagements, depending on how much value is placed in these semi-reality spaces. So, without further ado, enjoy the teaser that I have. Social media is playing a significant role in initiating and defining relationships, along with being a filter that determines the health of such relationships. The main goal of this project is to explore how we present ourselves on social media platforms. I've met with 3 very different women in relationships who explain how their unique social media usage impacts their romantic situations. I'll introduce Jackie, a woman in a healthy 5-year relationship that began on Instagram, Elisa, a hardworking real estate agent that hates how the pressures of social media affects her relationships, and Aliani, an individual that uses social media to catch infidelity within her long-distance relationship.
I am in a 5-year relationship right now with a guy named Michael, and we met on Instagram.
Could you give up social media for a year for this amount of money? And I'm like, I would do that for less money, yes. Like, I 100%, if I didn't need it for work, I would probably delete it. I've deleted before I did nightlife when I lived in California. I've deleted social media for like a month or so at a time, and it was absolutely amazing.
I would go through all of his recently liked pictures to see if he was cheating. I would go through all of his DMs to see if he was cheating. I would do a lot. I would do the most. And I found something every single time.
I've also had the pleasure of meeting with an expert in the field of love, Dr. Karen Anderson-Abril. Her career derives from hardship in romance as well, and her background and professionalism in the romantic department was key to tie Jackie, Elisa, and Aliani together to offer some sort of middle ground.
Certainly people do meet each other. People slide into each other's DMs all the time, and that's how they meet each other. So right now, it's such a part of the fabric of our social experience. It's really woven its way into everything. It's kind of hard to think of a social life without considering social media.
I presented these 5 strangers with relationship statements about romance and social media. As I ask questions and I present these statements, I encourage you to play along. Multiple social media accounts seem suspicious. 3, 2, 1. Social media should be taken very seriously. 3, 2, 1. Dating has never really been easy, and doing so in the 21st century, with social media being a big component to the social fabric we understand it to be, it makes it harder than ever. From the times of predetermined courting centuries ago to the current liberties that we have now, being able to choose our own partner, we are the captains of our own fate. So as long as you find the proper place and use of social media in this big confusing puzzle of life, perhaps maybe you'll be able to take a little bit more control in your love life. And like I said, I just want to give a heavy thank you to Matthew Fine, Lauren Cogan, and Sherry Culver for being on my committee and being chair. I literally cried like all the time just to make sure that all of this happened. And to Jackie. So you guys are awesome.
Thank you, Cass, and congratulations on this project. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Avery Souders. Avery received her undergraduate degree in communication studies here in Klein, where she began researching K-pop when she was a sophomore. Avery also received a minor in fine arts, and her artistic skill is evident in the artwork she created for the graduate showcase booklet, which is fantastic. I'm honored to introduce Avery Souders and her thesis, The New Pied Pipers, The Globalization of K-pop and the Role of Parasocial Relationships.
Hello, everybody. So yes, as Laura said, I did my research on K-pop. So if you don't know, K-pop is Korean popular music. It has become more popular now, at least in Western media, more so than it has in recent years. We've seen this with things like BTS, or most recently, even with Coachella, we have aespa, who is a newer K-pop group who just performed and was a big headliner for the show. So my main research question was, why and how has K-pop become so popular in the US at this point in time? Because K-pop is not a new thing. It's actually been around since the 1990s, usually with the most famous group being Sotaejian Boys, who are not a group anymore, but are very reminiscent of the boy groups we saw in the 90s in America. So that includes NSYNC, Backstreet Boys, but also with integration of American Black culture with rap and hip hop. So I applied theories of globalization and hybridization as a baseline for my research, and this was done with the use of Jan Nederveen Peters and Dal Youngjin, and a lot of Youngjin's work on globalization and hybridization ended up helping me a lot more than I expected. And so a big thank you to Suman Saw for that. But his work did a lot with the integration of American music stylization and lyrics into the K-pop genre. So what exactly is globalization? It's a big word thrown around a lot when researching media. Globalization is usually explained by the ever-encompassing growth of the world. So what I mean by this is the use of the internet making everything more interconnected and more easily accessible in the world as it is today. Hybridization then comes into play when we look at the interconnection of cultures. So as Marwin Crady put it, global and local cultures mix to create something new. So in the sense of K-pop, we have our global culture of American music, which is usually become a worldwide thing, and local culture, which is that use of Korean culture, Korean local culture. Because even before K-pop, actually, there was trot music, which is still very popular today with older groups. Now, this all culminates into parasocial relationships and interactions and what they play into the popularity of K-pop in Western populations. So parasocial relationships are these perceived relationships that fans create with their idols, with their celebrities. This is only one-sided. The idols are not aware of this person being a real, or are not aware of the fans. The fan believes that they're in this relationship with the idol. They're friends. They're in something of more of a romantic type, which is going a little bit too far, but it's still a connection that somebody creates with this celebrity figure. So just a quick thing, if you look at the pictures up here on the screen in the top left-hand corner, you'll see Sotaejian boys, and there is something to mention in K-pop is that there is cultural appropriation that does occur. It is a culturally homogenous community and country, but it is becoming more open to foreigners and learning about other cultures. And Black culture is a very popular thing in the youth over in Korea. So you see a lot of people begin to wear certain locks, styles of locks, use some type of slang when talking in English. So that is just something I did touch on in my research. So you do see that. As well in the top right corner is Yoon Mire, who is actually a Korean American. She was born in Texas, and her father is Black and her mother is Korean. And she is one of the top rappers in Korea and is considered the godmother of rap there. Other groups you see as you go down, go through the decades to the bottom where you have groups that are about 23 members, which is NCT, or Sonyeonshide, Girls' Generation, which is around 9 groups, or 9 members. All in all, this is a mixture, a hybrid of American and Korean culture to create this sensational genre. So in my research, I ended up doing a general qualitative and quantitative analysis. I looked at different sites, which was YouTube, Weverse, and VLive. Now, Weverse is a not as popular app in the mainstream of the world, but with those who are fans of K-pop, they do use it, especially for BTS. VLive is a live streaming app, again, used mainly for K-pop groups, K-pop fans, where they can watch their idols actually have live conversations with fans, and you can comment and interact in certain ways. The groups I chose were Blackpink, BTS, Stray Kids, and aespa. So 2 of these groups are girl groups, 2 are boy groups. And just as well, they are relatively new, starting between the years of 2013 and 2020. So for the quantitative research, I looked at VLive, what was it? Yes, sorry. I looked at VLive, and what I did with this is I looked at around 400 some videos and went through each one and looked at the various comments, likes, and views of each video. And what you see is a culmination of that in this very jarring graph. You see with BTS, there's a large difference between their views and likes and such. And that just shows the popularity where they only have 100 videos, whereas Stray Kids had 388 and still couldn't even match with a lot of their views and likes. And also that is 50 billion likes, by the way. It's a very large interaction of the fan population. For the qualitative research, I actually looked at different YouTube videos, and under each video for these groups, I looked at the 50 English language comments that did show in some way a form of someone having a relationship with the idols. And this could be something as simple as, I love BTS, oh, Yoongi, marry me, something very simple as that, to people having long, heartfelt messages that the idols may or may not have read. Ooh. So I just want to show, during my research, this is a screenshot from VLive, which is within the same minute one of the members had posted. And at first, it was only 20,000 likes with only a couple thousand comments. And in the next couple seconds is 20,000 likes with over 15,000 comments. So it just shows you how popular and how powerful this interaction is, these relationships are. People saying, we missed you, I love you, and use of the Purple Heart as well, which is specific to BTS, but that's more touched on in my thesis. And then these are also different VLives that I looked at. And with this last one on the far left-hand or right-hand side, you see all of these comments are also within the same minute. So I did have issues with going through comments to see exactly how many there were, or actually getting a good look at how many different things were being said, because I couldn't even get past a couple minutes. So my conclusion from this whole thing was that the internet, of course, has played a huge part in the marketing goals of the K-pop companies that they're with, and that the interaction is a lot easier and less complicated, and there's not as much travel that needs to be done. You can just sit on your phone, get a notification saying that your idol is going live, and you can sit there and watch that for however long they are on. And there's also a lot of cultural adaptations of how music sounds and lyrical vocalizations and beats and whatnot that are similar to American popular music that have created this hybrid genre that we all know today, or may have been introduced today, who knows. And again, internet and social media platforms are just a key part of what keeps these relationships alive, because it is on both the fans, the idols, and also the idols companies to keep everyone in this loop of interaction forever. Thank you.
So excellent work and very interesting triangulation of qualitative and quantitative research. I'd like now to introduce to all of you Emily Tobin. Emily took my PhD seminar on epistemologies of the South, identity and representation last semester. She was surrounded by PhD students, and still she demonstrated superb levels of skill and creativity in the areas of theory, epistemology, and media studies. I leave you with Emily and her master's thesis title, Hit Them Where It Hurts, Self-Deprecating Humor in Adult Animation as a Stress Coping Mechanism.
Thank you. Hi all, I'm Emily Tobin. My thesis, Hit Them Where It Hurts, Self-Deprecating Humor. Did I do that? Okay, thank you. In adult animation as a stress coping mechanism, I'm really using this research as preliminary research for a larger project I'm planning to do later on in a doctoral program. So this was really more focused for the basis and building the reasoning for that project.
So this thesis explored the possible reasoning behind the recent success of adult animated television series amongst millennials and Gen Z. And when I say adult animation, I mean computer, hand-drawn, or motion work that's specifically catered to adult audiences and interests. So the millennial and Gen Z demographics are important to this research because not only are they the two largest American adult populations and therefore have a very large influence in society, but they also face the highest levels of stress and mental illness than any other demographic. And to cope with this stress, they've overwhelmingly recorded that they consume media in order to do that. And even more specifically to that, they're consuming adult animated comedic media to do that. So this thesis argues that the comedic adult animated media they're consuming is so popular for coping with their stress because of the utilization of self-deprecating humor. And what that means is when characters comedically admit their own faults or weaknesses and struggles. But interestingly enough, the thesis argues that the self-deprecating humor being used actually focuses on the very stressors that the demographics are trying to escape from. So with that being said, it kind of raises the question of why these struggling demographics would choose such media to cope with their stress if they are potentially harping on the very stressors they're trying to escape from. And there has been previous research that's argued that self-deprecation is harmful to people. However, this thesis aims to explore the possible benefits of using self-deprecation. So these are the theoretical frameworks that I used, and I don't have enough time to go in depth into all of them, but overall they focus and build off of one another on how people choose and use media for stress coping, specifically with certain aspects of like social support, community, and kind of building relationships and seeing themselves in the content in that self-deprecation. So using those theories and research questions, a content analysis was performed to understand what, if any, self-deprecating humor was used in popular adult animated television shows, and then kind of examining how that self-deprecation was used for, in patterns and frequency. So initial codes were developed based on the theoretical frameworks as well as previous research on humor, stress, millennials, Gen Z, all things like that. And then 10 of the most popular adult animated television shows were selected that ran between the years of 2010 and 2022. You will notice some of the shows aired prior to 2010, and that just means those seasons and episodes were omitted from the data. So once the shows were selected, different seasons and episodes were analyzed. And once they were selected, the certain seasons and episodes, line-by-line coding ensued to determine instances and patterns of the initial codes of self-deprecation. This is just an example of some of the frequency of self-deprecation. You will see self-worth was actually the highest occurring and type of self-deprecating humor used, with anxiety and depression following close behind in the television shows. So from there, categories based on kind of what the line-by-line coding and the data talked about were formed, so environmental, self, and social, which were further narrowed down into the theme of stressors. So overall, the theme of stressors and what this adult animated television shows were talking about in self-deprecating humor did actually focus on the stressors that millennials and Gen Z have stated they're using that media to escape from. So in conclusion, I think it's interesting that these shows are kind of named as being so prevalent in helping millennials and Gen Z cope with their stress and mental illness when they're using self-deprecating humor that's focusing on the very stressors that they're trying to escape from. And I am hoping in future research to really get audience opinions on why that is in social support and if they're seeing themselves in those messages. But I do think it's important to look at the recent popularity of these animated television shows and kind of consider for future creators like why this is so helpful to these audiences. That's it. Thank you.
At the end of our last meeting to discuss his MA project, Ketterick Waddell gifted me a beautiful zine centered on a collection of his own photographs. Like his zine, Ketterick's project is all about self-exploration and expression as vehicles for social change. I leave you with Ketterick Waddell and his project titled What Do You Know from Funny? An autoethnographic mediation of stand-up comedy, humor, and theory as pedagogical mediums towards love and praxis. Ketterick.
All right. Thank you, Clemencia. Good morning to the congregation. Thank you all for coming out today. My name is Ketterick Waddell, professional human, amateur adult. And I just want to thank you all for sticking around this afternoon now and witnessing all the other great members of my cohort present themselves and all the work that we've accomplished and completed in this program. So I say all that to say that we did have to save one of the best for last. It doesn't have to do anything with my last name starting with a W. With that said, I want to give a trigger warning for language and content for myself and for my presentation. So I just want to say that the human experience is real. We can all attest to that. It's also fucked up. It's real fucked up, actually, unfortunately. But the human experience is also beautiful. And that's why I share this piece with the communities and that I come from and with you all today. So my piece, my film, What Do You Know from Funny, is an autoethnographic mediation of stand-up comedy, humor, and theory as pedagogical mediums towards love and praxis. Through a narrative prose presented as a stand-up comedy routine, accompanied by media clips from Black comedians, activists, writers, and scholars, What Do You Know from Funny is part documentary, performance art. It fuses together sociological and communication theories alongside critical race, feminist, and queer theory to address how we are conditioned by the oppressive systems we exist under to perform and express ourselves in a society where homogeneity and emotional repression is normalized. It employs the rhetoric of various Black comedians, activists, writers, and scholars to inform this cultural exploration. It is a self-reflection of individual growth and healing through humor, critical thinking, and community. All right, so more background and concept. Humor has played a formative role in my identity and how I've been able to navigate the world as a Black queer artist, as a Black American man, and as an expressionist. Comedy, and specifically stand-up comedy, has provided me with anecdotes that humanize my experiences as a Black American. And as a young adult, I engaged with a range of theory and theorists who shifted my perception of society and the systems we exist in. Because navigating the imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist, patriarchal society led me to question the cultural and political atmosphere we all exist under. It was theory that provided me with an ease of mind, because like politics, theory is a tool that we use to connect with the human experience, to connect with other humans, and to cultivate peace for all. Politics and theory, I believe, aren't subversive if they aren't internalized and practiced in our lived experience. So rather than creating a paper or project that merely performed intellect or critiqued media theory, I wanted to utilize my position within academia to produce a body of work that spoke to the communities and people that inspired and supported my growth as a human. So some of the theory that I engage with in this project, symbolic interactionism, cultivation theory, praxis theory, critical race theory, feminist theory, queer theory. Some other concepts are cultural hegemony and dramaturgy, and I'd hope that by now we'd all be somewhat familiar with some of these if we're completing this program. Specifically, I wanted to focus on praxis theory. I believe is relevant because to all of us, the intellect and rhetoric that we acquired in this program will hopefully be applied in our lives and will support the communities that we come from. Dramaturgy as well is relevant because similar to myself standing up on stage right now performing this for all of you, our lived experiences, is a performance. Some of the, So some of the comedians and activists and writers and scholars included in the film, comedians were Martin Lawrence, Paul Mooney, Monique, Adele Givens, and Dave Chappelle. Some of the activists, writers, and scholars were Malcolm X, James Baldwin, Bell Hooks, Audre Lorde, and Dick Gregory. So here is the trailer for What Do You Know from Funny? Here we go. Good evening, my name is Ketterick Waddell, and I am here to talk about myself. So let's get started. If you know me, I really enjoy being myself. So how many of you have been in love before? No. Love is real, you know, and fucked up. It's actually real fucked up. It was always women, and specifically Black and queer women, who helped me come to this realization. I want to thank, first off, Clemencia Rodríguez for accepting me into the program and, providing me so much critique and direction. Also to Laura Zaylea for providing the opportunity for being my chair, for also allowing me to film the routine right here in Studio One within the interactive media class. I want to thank the members of that class for also being the crew and audience. Y'all know who you are. Some of you are in here right now. And of course, I want to thank Larissa Kingston-Mann for being a part of my committee because they're also rad and contributed to a lot of the rhetoric and language that was presented in this piece. Most importantly, this piece was dedicated to my mother and grandmother, as well as all the women in my life, because without them, I wouldn't be the halfway decent fella that I am today. And, oh yeah, well, I have your attention. This is a flyer for a photography exhibit that I'll be showing next Friday, May 6th at Side Street Gallery, where I'll be showing a series of 35mm photos. So if you can make it, please come. That's that.
Katie Travers could not be here to show the work today, but she has sent in a video. I know it's late. It's our last one. So I'm delighted to introduce Katie Travers. I first met Katie when she took my class Producing and Directing, where she wrote a script called The Group Chat. Both the group chat and Katie's final Master of Arts project, a fictional narrative called Gay Street, are entertaining and crowd-pleasing narrative projects that celebrate underlying themes of friendship, self-discovery, and community. Katie's final graduate project is a fiction film that she has written and filmed and is currently editing. Katie can't join us in person today, so she's created a video presentation. I haven't seen it, but here it is. I'm honored to introduce Katie Travers and her final MSP MA project, Gay Street, a narrative film for the LGBTQ+ community.
Hi everyone, my name is Katie, and I'm really sorry I couldn't be there in person to present my project, but I am still very glad to have been included. So I did a creative project, and my creative project is titled Gay Street, and Gay Street is a narrative short film that is for the LGBTQ+ community. Gay Street focuses on telling a queer story while also focusing on inclusivity and representation of the LGBTQ+ community. So one goal of mine during this project was to provide queer actors and creators with the opportunity to work on this project with me in order to tell a queer story in the most accurate way possible. So in my opinion, queer stories are best told by queer voices. So not having this idea of straight washing where straight people tell the story of, someone who is part of the LGBTQ+ community and don't have the firsthand knowledge of what it is like to actually go through that experience, whatever that may be. And so also the idea that representation is important, but the right kind of representation is just as important. So not having portrayals of the community on the screen that can contribute to unhealthy stereotypes or prejudices or further reinforcing negative opinions of the community. Cultivation theory, though it does primarily tie in with television, the idea that we form opinions and our perceptions of reality based on the media we consume kind of ties in with having that representation that is accurate and not unhealthy or negative or contributing to the perception of the community in a negative way. And then critical theory is the idea of challenging kind of the social norms, which in this case would be challenging that hierarchy of, this is what's happened in the past and this is what we're not going to do anymore, and going forward with more positive and healthy representation. Media sample, I am including a scene from the short film, and this scene is kind of one of my favorite scenes, and it really embodies not only the queer aspect of it, but also just like the type of story that I was trying to tell, where it is a serious story, but it's told in more of a lighthearted and comical way. So I hope you guys enjoy, and thank you again for including me in the presentation, even though I couldn't physically be there.
Are you awake? No. Should we talk about last night?
What's there to talk about?
Well, I feel like we have a lot to unpack here.
We can pack it another time. I just want to wallow in self-pity for a little bit.
Wallow away.
Okay, well, now I'm awake, and I can feel you staring at me, so looks like we're having this conversation now at 7:36 a.m.
It's good to talk about it while the memory is still fresh. Helps before the trauma sets in.
Are we talking about the party, or are you interrogating me as a witness to a murder?
To be fair, I think Caleb's pride got murdered last night. Alright, that one was for me.
I keep hoping that I'm dreaming, but I am not.
Have you talked to him?
No. I think it was equally as traumatizing for him.
Fair. I tried to warn you, but you were so excited about Tess, and before I knew it, Caleb had given himself the starring role in a John Hughes movie.
I know. It's not your fault. Oh my god, Tess.
Oh, yeah. You kind of blew her off when she tried to comfort you, and she seemed kind of upset.
I know what happened.
Sorry. I wasn't sure if we were having a hangover type of moment where I was Bradley Cooper and you were Zach Galifianakis and we were trying to piece together what happened.
Wait.
You know? The Hangover? The movie?
No, I know what The Hangover is. But why do you get to be Bradley Cooper?
That's what you're worried about?
Wouldn't you be? I might go to the fields to clear my head.
So we want to thank all of our amazing, creative, smart students in the MSP MA program. So much has happened since these students began their graduate studies. A pandemic that revealed how unequal our societies are. The murder of George Floyd as revelation of the urgent need for racial reckoning in this country. A series of climate events that left us questioning if the ways in which we have designed our societies make sense. Our students are rising to the challenge and exploring the power of media to question what is and to imagine what could be. They also seem to be saying another world is possible.
I just want to echo that and say congratulations to all of you on your theses, your projects, comprehensive exams. It's fantastic what you've created, and we're so proud of you and proud that you represent Klein College and the Department of Media Studies and Production. So again, congratulations.
Hi, before everybody scatters, first, congratulations to everyone completing their programs in MSP MA program. I want to take a moment and thank Professor Rodriguez for being a wonderful director of this program. She is ending her term and transitioning to a different program, and I just wanted to publicly thank you, Clemencia, for all you've done.
Thank you. It's been a ride that I'll always remember directing this program, and yeah, keep me in your committees the next cohort. Thank you.